After seeing that prison train in Belgium, I can believe Bach was right, but I couldn't get him to comment on what was happening in Patton's zone of command. No telling how long these guys have been standing in those coal cars with no relief at all, hours and hours, maybe for days. Lucky for us, Patton didn't get his way. The Army had shipped all the experienced soldiers home, and us inexperienced people replaced them. We knew nothing about war to speak of. So it's a good thing that Patton didn't have his way and continued fighting the communists on the way to Russia, because we didn't know anything about it. In October 45, we got the chance to go to Berlin to supposedly watch a football game between our division and someone else. And those who knew what was going on up there immediately started saving their little chocolate bars or the cigarettes that comes in the rations and everything they could, because they knew they could make a lot of money on the black market up there by selling these things. We stopped on the way up at an English, overnight we stopped at an English place in the English zone, and our breakfast was boiled fish, which was something contrary to American diet. We wondered how they did so well during the war. Sorry, England. But anyway, we got up to Berlin, and the Allies were creating a monument in Berlin in honor of the victorious Allies, this was being done in the Tiergarten. You could imagine how the Americans would have taken it if Germany had won the war and they built a monument to the victorious Germans in Washington, D.C. Well, I wonder how the Germans felt about that. I would guess at the minute that they stopped occupying Germany and turned it back over to the Germans, that monument came down. In Berlin, a fifth of whiskey was selling for about $90, and a carton of cigarettes was selling for 10, I think. And that was pretty expensive considering the cost of cigarettes in those days. Bars of soap were $10. I saw one German who opened up a suitcase, not a suitcase, it was a small suitcase, and it was just stuffed with dollars, thousands and thousands of dollars. About that time, though, the Army went to using script. We didn't use dollars anymore. So now the medium of exchange was the Reichsmark, and you couldn't collect those and send those home, so it put a little bit of a crimp in the black marketers' efforts to get rich. My buddy and I weren't that interested in the ceremonies over at the monument, so we walked back to the Reichstag, which is to the left there at the Brandenburg Gate, and we went in to where Hitler's bunker was and went down into the bunker, but we were there for a little while until the Russians came and made us leave. But at least I got a chance to see Hitler's bunker. It was all cleaned out by then at home, so at this time I had no camera. I had to borrow one. It was like one of the cheap American ones, and the weather wasn't good. As you can see, it was kind of rainy and cloudy, so the picture didn't turn out very well. And apparently it didn't take very many, because I can only remember having these two pictures, but I value them highly. The Brandenburg Gate. Through most of the winter, we continued to do what occupying armies do. Everything but train, manage the displaced person population. There was very much hunger in Germany. The Allies didn't allow any food ships to come in for 2 years after the war. Like I told you, I didn't see one vehicle in my drive from Frankfurt to Kassel. Never saw one bus in the towns, never saw any streetcars. In Berlin, we saw nothing. You see my picture there at the Brandenburg Gate, absolutely nothing. So how they kept them starving to death, I don't know. Some of them might not have kept them starving to death. There were people in the United States government that wanted it this way. They were just getting back at the Germans now that they were helpless and couldn't fight back. So they were hungry. There was the GIs would go to the post tavern bar, and there were girls available for the asking. In case a soldier caught something, all he had to do was say, well, that girl did it, and she was put away for 30 days. I am sure the Germans hated us in spite of the front they put towards us. There was a lot to it. That question that the Ingrid Bauer in Salzburg did when we went back in '95, asking about that same thing. No, the more I think about it, the more I think the Germans hated us. Here we were building a monument to the victorious Allies right in the middle of Berlin. We had destroyed all their cities. Even little towns were destroyed for absolutely no reason at all. They had no military significance, just destroyed for the sake of destroying, it appears. I mean, how could it be any other way? They just had no choice. Eisenhower decreed that if there was an uprising and Germans killed American soldiers, he would retaliate by killing 120 Germans for every American soldier. So when you talk about hostages, the Americans had our way of keeping order too. So that's the way war is. Things finally settled down, and they didn't need me as a driver anymore. All the old timers that had been sent home, the DPs had been taken care of, I guess. The Ukrainians had been sent back to Russia, and so they finally gave me a radio operator's job. As Devarty, job was mainly to communicate with other divisions, and we would stay in contact with North Africa and other divisions, although we were still a long ways from getting into any serious training, but at least we did a little bit before I was sent home in May. The Germans were desperate for equipment and food, anything for normal living, and I'd acquired some radio stuff, and in fact I had a radio that didn't work, Telefunk or something like that, and I traded it to a German who had this old but very good camera. So I finally managed to get a camera, which is 2.5 by 3.5 negative, and it had flash, and the picture of the guy in the post tavern was taken with that camera. That the bouncer on the left there, he wears a .45 on his hip, so you didn't mess with him. The time came now for the Army to send me home. My 2 years was upcoming, and it's easier for future calculations to have me discharged at the end of 2 years. So they sent us up to Marburg or me up to Marburg, of course others too, separate from Bill Blake. They'd given him the position of sergeant, and I was left at corporal one morning or one day. The company commander, who was lieutenant, or a battery commander, well, I guess it was company, he came in and I got to attention, but apparently not fast enough, because he said, "Gudgel, if you're going to be a sergeant, you got to be a soldier, and you're not a soldier." He was a West Pointer, which is okay. I mean, I guess so. I guess I wasn't enough soldier to make sergeant, but just as well, would only be another month or so. But the rank wouldn't have hurt. The Germans were still very hungry. The little kids would come to the mess hall when we left the mess hall and get anything left in our mess kits. We were camped outside in a little wood here amongst some German graves killed late in the war. And then we were sent up to Bremerhaven, where we loaded onto the SS McAndrew, which was just as crowded going back as the Queen Elizabeth was coming over. We went to Fort Dix, New Jersey. This is a picture of us waiting to get on the train to head back across the country. I don't remember anything about the train ride to speak about. All I can remember about the train ride is as we got close to Seattle, Camp Roberts, or Fort Lewis, these young guys were throwing away their wine bottles and whatever they had with booze in it, which was real funny because, they were only about, a lot of them 18, 19, 20 years old.